Hi, I'm Patricia Ercolino, the producer of Sojourners Along the Way, and this edition of Sojourners Along the Way is much different than what I had anticipated. I had heard about a hayride being offered for free at the Ridges, so I invited some friends to go, and then I learned that not only was it a hayride without any hay, very comfortable seats though, but it was a tour of the Athens Mental Health Center. That brought back a lot of memories for me because you see, when I was in college at Ohio University, the Athens Mental Health Center had a program that students could live at the mental health center, exchanging room and board for 10 hours of service with the patients. And I was placed on the geriatric board. So I had all these grandmas and grandpas all around me. We formed great relationship, and I'm very thankful for that experience. I'm going to tell you 2 experiences and then a couple of other things before we proceed to the program. Like I said, we formed really good relationships, and so this one gentleman, now geriatrics, 65 and older, he must have been closer to 80. He wanted to show me his prowess, so he did a headstand. Put my heart in my throat, but he succeeded, and he didn't get hurt. He didn't have a heart attack. I didn't have a heart attack, so it was really positive. Another thing was, at that time, the mental health center used to allow the resident volunteers to use the state vehicles. So I would take the patients different places. And one time I said, well, where would you like to go? And so they decided for our next trip they would like to go to Parkersburg, West Virginia. Now, I'm a college student, but I had enough sense to think that being at the Athens Mental Health Center, they are wards of the state. If they're wards of the state, I didn't think they should go outside of the state of Ohio. I asked everybody. I asked my supervisor, I asked other supervisors, I checked with as many people as I could. Everybody kept saying, yes, it's okay. So we went to Parkersburg, West Virginia, had a great time, came back, and afterwards somebody said to me, one of the supervisors, you're not supposed to take wards of the state out of the state of Ohio. And I said, I asked before we went. I feel comfortable telling that story now because I don't think there can be any repercussions because it was a long time ago and they had a lot of fun. So, today's story. Well, building up to today's story. I've always had an interest with mental health. I minored in psychology at Ohio University, and I got involved with the Athens Mental Health Incorporated, which was a nonprofit group of people that were interested in helping people that had been in the hospital to help them readjust to getting back into community life. And they asked me to be their treasurer, which was fine. I'm good at math, taking care of a checkbook, no problem. But then the group decided, there were 15 of us, decided that we were going to go for a federal grant. So I went from being a treasurer of a very small checkbook to now being the bookkeeper of a federal grant. Again, I don't have a background in that, but I'm good at math, and I had the logic to say if you're using federal money, you must document every single penny. And it took forever to help these 2 wonderful, wonderful women that did so much for Athens Mental Health Incorporated, and we did get the gathering place started. So, that's a preamble to today's program. I hope you will enjoy this edition of Sojourners Along the Way. There will be some contact information, and hopefully you will be able to help. Thank you very much.
Here? There you go. Well, these are better seats.
Get the driver and the horses, okay? And we have some matching people. At least their t-shirts match. So, somebody tell us what the t-shirts say and why. The only guy in this group.
We have Mr. Bubble, makes getting clean almost as much fun as getting dirty. And many years ago, They all dressed up as Mr. Bubble for Halloween. Our friend Amy found these online and said, let's get them for our alumni event. So we all have them.
So you're going to wear them all weekend?
No,
no,
God, no.
No, tomorrow.
And I was going to say, one of the funny things is we haven't actually seen each other in 28 years. This is the first time we've seen each other in 28 years.
Are you serious?
Yes.
Indeed.
Wow, you guys did very well. Who coordinated getting the t-shirts?
That would be Amy.
Yay, Amy, you go, gal.
Amy did everything.
Amy did everything. Amy, you're good.
She is good.
Right on the big wagon
She
this
found
time.
us all throughout the United States.
I'm sorry, say that
She
again.
found us all
You know,
throughout.
go ahead
I
and put
mean, we
the
all
steps
lost
up.
contact.
All, are you class of what?
Shut the door first.
88, 89.
88, 89? Okay.
That's a young stud, first time in town.
Really?
That's why my brother was there helping him tonight.
All right, all right.
We get
We
it.
trained him. John, okay. It looks like we're loaded, so are we ready?
We're ready.
We're ready.
Duck is your name, right? Duck?
My name is Doug,
Yeah.
Doug McCabe. I am now former curator of
Wait a
manuscript
minute.
collections at the Archives and Alden Library.
Did you retire?
I just retired August 1st. Thank you. And I
We're ready
was,
to move, right?
yep.
He taught me in high school. That's sad.
Sorry about that.
Sorry.
So Connecticut and where else?
We have Connecticut, New York,
New York.
Fairport, New York, and North Carolina.
I'm glad you're here right now.
We have Dayton, Ohio, and Cleveland, Ohio.
I'm from Troy. So.
Okay, I work in Troy, Hobart.
Real? Oh, well, my dad did. So did my mom, my mother-in-law, my father-in-law. Well, some of them worked at Hobart Brothers,
Okay.
the welding people
Right, I
and
do
stuff.
Other.
Now we'll get to the rest of you in a minute because I want to get started here. You're looking right now at the original complex, and we're now coming up to the main administration building as was known then. Some of you will be able to see at the top there where it says 1868. That's when they decided to start building the place. It was not opened until January of 1860 or 1874.
Stop here like you.
Okay, so it looks like there's going a whole bunch of refurbishment going on, which is wonderful. This was these posts right here out in front were a real mess because of well, they're sandstone, so it's a lot of erosion going on. This portico that goes up stories and stories is not original to the building. It was added in the 1890s because they had already noticed lots of erosion happening along the bricks and the stone and so forth. So they asked the state of Ohio for the money to put this portico on, which I think really does nicely finish it off. If you were judged, important word, judged, insane, those are the front doors that you would go through when you were brought here from generally the 18 counties of southeast Ohio, but it ebbed and flowed as far as what counties you might be brought from. And on top of that, there were people who were transferred here from the Dayton Asylum, which predates this place, the Columbus Asylum, and that predates this place, as well as the Cleveland Asylum that predates this place. And you will find that for Dayton and Franklin County, the Columbus Asylum, most of those people were transferred here because they were from southeast Ohio. The people who were transferred here from Cleveland were those because of overflow in Cleveland. These people had never been to southeast Ohio, but they were sent down here anyway. And based on my research, they had no family up there in the Cleveland area, certainly had no family here. And those of them who died, many of them were buried here, if they died here. This set then of buildings, if you will, that come off the main administration building are the male side day one, males were separated from females by that main administration building, where if you were sane enough, or insane less, I guess is the way to put it, you could go to the chapel, you could go to the dining rooms that were there and so forth. Those were the entry rooms, but then the upper stories over there were apartments for the superintendent, the bursar, the female attendants and so forth, you know, the administration, if you will. This little building right here across the front was built in the 1970s, I think around 1976. It's called the geriatric ward. It really throws the symmetry off of this whole original complex. If you looked at the original complex from the sky, which you could not do in 1874, it looked like a bird in flight, just like those birds that are flying and soaring right now. The head of the bird, the beak, would be the main administration building, and then on back from there was the body, and then these were the wings, literally, as well as figuratively. This is the building that was built in the 1920s. It's the receiving hospital. Prior to that, anybody who had anything going on with them came in through those front doors. After that, they were brought in here first to see if they had any communicable diseases and so forth before they were put in with the main population. There was also a morgue in here and an autopsy room. They could really, this is really literally a hospital building right here. 2 buildings behind us. Well, I guess it's only one now, come to think of it. That was part of the cottage system. The original setup was under the Kirkbride plan, which was everybody would be in the same big, long complex. They would be separated out based on their mental disturbance by floors or by wards. So if they were schizophrenic, they might show up in one part, and you know, melancholic in another part. At the turn of the last century, this idea of the cottage plan came about, and that's one of the buildings that's represented in that. And that building could, say, house schizophrenics, for example, or something. So a whole different change in the housing of people, but also it began to illustrate a change in how people were treated and what their what attendants did with them and so forth. Under the original idea, beginning in 1874, was called moral treatment. That doesn't mean that people were considered immoral and that's why they're put in here, as much as it meant morally treating them. Okay, that's a very important difference to understand. A little bit more, you know the drill, right? It's on down, just we'll give everybody a good chance to get a good look. Okay, that's pretty good right there. You see the little bow that's coming out of this last building, part of the original complex. Go up to the 4th floor and you can see 2 windows that are sticking out. That's where Martha's stain is. If you've heard about Martha, and the woman who...
Was it Margaret?
Margaret, yeah, well, yeah, and they called her Martha too. Margaret, thank you. I'm a little rusty, it's been a year. And I'm retired now, so... Margaret disappeared. Now, I always thought when I heard about this, first of all, I was very skeptical. There's a stain on the floor of the woman who died. And a patient, okay, and I thought, oh yeah, right. Well, then I was able to get in at one point. I've been inside 3 or 4 times now, and there really is a stain there. Okay. The interesting thing about the stain is that it's like a photographic negative.
See anything on?
Where her body was, there's no stain at all. The stain outlined. So. She was a patient here in the 1970s. I'd made the assumption that it was in the prior century, but it actually was in the 1970s. And she was found up there. They had she was missing for days on end, and then they came up and searched the place 3 times or something like that, and finally found the body. And by that point, it had decomposed enough. It was 6 weeks after she disappeared that they found the body. So you can imagine it was pretty decomposed. As a matter of fact, they had to scrape the stain or the body off the floor. Okay. The official designation of death was she just died, natural causes. I have 2 sources who have told me that no, she was murdered. That an attendant, one of 3 attendants who were familiar with her, took her up there, and while having his way with her, I'm trying to put it nicely, choked her to death and then left her up there. And he might very well have been the one who had the keys to be able to get up there, because you had to go from where she normally would have been in the other parts of the place. You would have had to have gone through 3 locked doors to get up to that spot, because that had been disused for years. Okay, so the official thing was somehow she managed to get up there and die. Now this was in the wintertime, and my personal guess is that the stain became that way, although there's a person who has done, an OU person who has done forensic study to say that this is wrong, but if you want to hear the made-up story, I guess is the way that she died just inside those windows. That's facing east, and as the body decomposes, it swells. The interior fluids break out of the body and spread out around the body. The reason why there's no stain underneath the body is because of a true photographic process, and that was using the sun coming through. Where the body was, there could be no stain because the sun did not touch it. The chemicals in the fluids of her body, around the body, were now exposed to the sun, and that's what made the stain. You can see the stain if you go on any of the websites about, Athens Asylum, haunted Athens Asylum, all that kind of crap. And you can see her head turned off to the side, you can see her hairline, you can see her forehead or nose, all that kind of stuff. It goes out to her elbows and down to her knees. And that would be because of gravity, really, in my opinion, that, those fluids, those body fluids are flowing to the lowest part of the body, and so that's where they're spreading out from. Okay, I don't know if I'm allowed, does that really explain it? Who knows? The building here is, there's a duplicate of it over on the other side, and then this building right along here was also added on over time. Okay, so it's not a part of the original complex. It was beat up as it looks right now. It was not. This building and several other buildings were built under the contract with a fellow by the name of Glennis. The local hospital was named after him. Little statement. It's $1 padlock won't keep you overnight. This is the very back of the main administration complex that runs straight through. This part right through here was built in 1895 because the original part was burned down, because probably because the heating system was also a part of all that, and that's probably what started the fire. So this is also not original. The heating system now, of course, is over there. You see the big stack sticking up, and that's the power plant that runs this place now. There was a power plant in between that place and this place, and it was right in between the two. Back in there, you're seeing some more stuff going on, some new roofing work done. I don't know that I really had a whole lot of influence in it, but standing back way back, looking up there, I saw a hole in the roof that you could drive a car through, and I made some phone calls and threw it. Fixed.
Stop here, right?
Yeah, fine. And that's because if you let the roof go with any place, the rest of it's just going to go to hell. Okay? And to me, the original complex is really the most important, even though we're talking about, you know, where we are back here. These are all additional buildings that came along later, and they're important in the sense that, just like the cottage that we went past over there around the corner, is showing the additions and changes and evolutions of the physical complex that then now help represent the changes in the treatment complexes and all of that kind of stuff. So that, like, this building here is on the female side and a duplicate of what we saw down there, and then right over here is another octagonal building. These were used as chapels because the main chapel and the main building became too small as they kept adding more and more people. This place was designed to have 543 people originally. It ended up in the early, like late 50s and early 60s with close to 2,000 people as patients, and it was even into the early 1960s. This had a larger payroll and more people working up here than at Ohio University. Okay, so one of my favorite lines is Athens, Ohio is one of those rare places, if not unique places, that had two institutions devoted to the mind. This one to fix the mind, the other one to expand and improve the mind, if you will. They hope to improve the mind here as well, because the whole idea behind a lot of this was people would not be here for the rest of their lives once they were brought in. People would be brought here to get fixed and taken back to their communities. And you see that up at the archives. We have admissions indexes. Between 1874 and 1954, there were over 10,000 women and 10,000 men admitted to this place. It's obvious that they couldn't all have been here for the rest of their lives. Another example of way to explain that is there are 3 cemeteries here. We'll go up to one of them, but the other 2 are over by the dairy barn, and there are just a little over 1,950 people buried in those cemeteries. These are undeclared people who died here. So anybody who died here, for the most part, was taken home and buried at home. So what happens then with these people? Who are they? Where they come from? And what were their problems? Their mental problems could be anything that you could imagine. There weren't a whole lot of criminally insane put here. A lot of those were put up at Lima. Behind us is the fire department. They had their own fire department up here. Okay. Now, that might bring to you the thinking that you might have heard that this was a self-sustaining operation. It never was. There were times when it was close to self-sustaining, but never at any one time was it completely all on its own. Okay. Right here in this parking lot used to be a greenhouse. On down below you see a brick building, and that was the potting shed, and there was a greenhouse to the right of that, and to the right of that is the old horse barn. The horse barn is original to the complex. The other stuff was added later on. This was added later on too. I mean, you can see that the architecture is extremely different.
Are you going to ride later?
This too was probably around the 1920s as well.
We'll be here till 8.
And then we also have another cottage here, and a couple more cottages coming up.
Where was the lakes at?
The what?
The lakes down over the front,
The
right?
lakes were clear down over the front. They were taken out when the Hocking River Channel was moved. So the lakes were destroyed, the pump house was destroyed, all of that kind of stuff. Unfortunately, in a sense. I mean, those were really beautiful. And the lakes came along not right in 1874, but certainly by the 1890s those lakes were there. They were set up in an interesting way too. They drew water from the Hocking River. The lake upstream, the most upstream, brought in the dirty, cruddy water from the Hocking River, and then there were actual granulated charcoal filters. Okay. Yeah. Granulated charcoal filters that ran through the rest of the lake, so that when you got to the fourth lake, the water was pretty cleaned up. That water was never really intended to be used for drinking water. Cisterns up here that could be used for that purpose. And you see now behind me the putt-putt course and the softball diamond. Those were here. They were built later, much later on. Again, for the patients, you might be able to say, but a lot of these things, like the ballroom in the original place, the chapel in the original place, and these kinds of things here, are actually probably more for the use of the staff than the patients. Once you let patients outside, you had a challenge. Trying to keep them corralled. Okay. This building right behind you, or some of you, and in front of me, is now the Conacher Biotechnology Center. This is an addition part you're seeing right here. The building was built originally in a U shape, and it's a part of the cottage plan, so it was built post 1900. And up at the archives, we have a scrapbook that labels this building as the suicide ward. Okay? So people would be segregated by not just gender, but also by their mental distress. Right? As far as I can tell, they were not segregated by race. But I'm not positive about that. There are certainly African Americans brought up here, and from what I can tell in the research that I've done, the population might have been about 10%. Behind me, coming up, cemetery number 1. It's also called the Tower Cemetery by some folks. This is the original cemetery. It was opened in 1880, 6 years after the original asylum was opened up. There is a story that there were people who died and were not repatriated prior to 1880. Okay, in the 1990s, when I became aware of this cemetery, it was a god-awful mess. All grown up, no mowing going on, scrub trees, all that kind of stuff. It was by the efforts of several people of the local chapter, the Athens chapter of NAMI, the National Association, right? I think it's National Association for the Mentally Ill, decided that this cemetery and the other 2 cemeteries, this was really a sacrilege to let them look the way they were at that time. So they came in and cleaned up the cemetery. So that happened before I really became aware and got involved in things, and thank God they did. It's a wonderful thing that they did. There's another program going on right now. All of the graves in this cemetery, and part of cemetery number 2, the headstones have numbers. No names, no dates, just numbers. Now you see a few stones sticking up that are oddballs. Those were added later on by family members who came in and put in, and somehow were allowed to put in headstones with names and dates and full comments and that kind of thing. Up at the archives in Alden Library, we have a copy of the grave book, the log book for the graveyards. It goes from 1880, when they first opened up, to 1945. In 1943, they started putting names and dates on the headstones. But like I said, here, all of these just have numbers. males and females. And just as when you came in the front doors of the place, you were given a patient number. If you were a male, it was, say, patient 171 in the early days. There could be a female a day or two before you or after you who was also given the number 171. She was a female patient, 171. He was a male patient, 171. In this cemetery, there are two 171s, one for a male and one for a female. Unless you know by reading the cemetery, which has been done several times, but I did it a couple of years ago, you don't know for sure what row represents males and what represents females. Now you do, because I'm the designated veterans guy, okay? So it's my job to make sure that there are flags and flag stands at all veterans' graves. So now you can look and see which rows are male and which ones are female, at least by veterans. What complicates things, though, is at the end of those rows, they added graves years later. And sometimes those are males and sometimes those are females in female rows or male rows. So it really gets funky. So it took some real work to figure it all out. And I've mapped that. And so that's now available, I think, on the NAMI Athens chapter website. As is, I have now gone through and documented every single person buried in these three cemeteries. Not just their names and their dates, but what county they came from, why they were in the asylum, all of the census records I can find, all the military records I can find, all that kind of stuff. So, you see a group of headstones right here. Those were all in three concentric circles until just about a year or two ago, well, a year and a half ago. For the longest time, there were two statements about that. One was that's how they originally buried people, was in circles, and then they gave up. And the other statement was that those circles were built much later by woodgy-boodgy witches and warlocks and stuff, so that they could have their weirdo cemetery or ceremonies and stuff. Okay, I don't know which of those is true, but I finally was able to find out from Hopkins College that they had a magnetometer, which is kind of like ground penetrating radar, and we were able to set up grids through here to use the magnetometer. The magnetometer does is when it sees soil that's been disturbed, because when soil's first laid down, it takes the magnetic direction of the way it's laid down. Okay, if you disturb that soil, then the magnetic direction is all Walker job, okay, like a grave would do. So they went down through here and they checked out where the graves are, and were able to show that where there's a grave, the magnetometer shows that things are funky. And where there's no grave, the things are just fine. And where those markers were in a circle, they were able to prove that there were no graves there. So somebody moved those grave markers for whatever reason, okay? I would have liked to have seen those markers put back where they really belong, but I didn't have any influence on that. It's all right to say. But the next process that's going on right now, and it's a slow process, is to add additional flat markers in front of every single one of these graves that has the name and the birth year and the death year of each of the patients who are buried here, with the idea to return to them the dignity and respect that they deserve as human beings. Now, the slow process is because the Ohio Department of Mental Health has insisted that the only way that that can be done is to find current day descendants of any of those people who are buried there and get their permission to put those flat markers in. That's doing reverse genealogy. You think genealogy is hard? Reverse genealogy is even harder. And so it's been a slow process. Now that said, you will notice that there are a few flat markers in there, and most of them, frankly, are in front of graves that have flags. And that's because I have identified those people as veterans. I'm an official veterans representative, I guess you could say, and so I can go to the VA and get free stones, free markers, have them cut, and then sent to us, and then we put them in a bunch of volunteers. Okay? So it's going to be a slow process to get it done, but I would dearly love to see that everybody in these cemeteries is identified, because they were human beings. They do deserve dignity and respect. They weren't always crazy, and even if that's the case, they were still human beings. And I've noticed too, one other quickie thing, and that is, since this kind of stuff has been done, the mowing and keeping care of the place, and the flags in there, and the flat markers, there's been a great deal less vandalism happening in here. And you know, the times that I come up here and I see people wandering around, they're not, well, I suppose maybe because they see me, they're not willing to steal headstones or whatever, but because those headstones, they're sticking up this far out of the ground, they're actually about this long, so they're not real easy to get out of the ground in the first place. But I do see people walking through here and really paying attention and really giving some attention to the place. Now, the other part that I should say while we're here is that the grounds of this place, the original grounds, are about a little over 500 acres. At its maximum was just under 2,000 acres. When this whole complex and its acreage was turned over to Ohio University in 1988, it was around 740 acres, which is almost exactly the acreage of the main campus. Okay. So all of that back in through there, orchards, pastures. Right behind here were two poultry houses, and on out piggeries, you know, so and smokehouse and all that kind of stuff. And like I said before, some people have said that this place was self-sustaining. It never really was, but there were times when it got a little bit closer. They did have over a period of time their own beef cattle operation. If you've heard of the dairy barn, that was that's the last remaining building of like we have a photograph up at the archives of when there were about 17 buildings out there. They had a big and well known and well respected dairy operation as part of this place. Okay, so but those things ebbed and flowed over time. There's a few Masonic ones. There's like, maybe a string of numbers or something, but there's almost nothing really negative. And particularly, there are almost no derogatory words, which I found very interesting. A bunch of us went through that place, with rubbing paper that you use on gravestones and stuff, and we did that on all of the window lintels that had messages on it. But also then in that courtyard, there's a little tiny nook that's back in there, and there's a bunch of messages scraped into brick stuff. They're just fascinating. Now, right behind us, that's Cottage M. It's said that was at one point used as a house of ill repute.
Courthouse.
Yes.
The ladies were patients, and the men putting them to use were locals.
Sad.
Yeah.
Well, if you were already in the business, then you just have to be here.
Well, one woman, and I don't know if she was a part of that operation, when she was admitted, it was noted that she had witnessed Lincoln's assassination in 1865. The thing was, she was actually a prostitute in Washington, D.C. This building is the amusement hall. That was the first building refurbished up here after Ohio University took over the place. That was built at the turn of the last century to replace the ballroom or amusement hall in the main complex. Okay, so this is a very quick rundown, a very quick review of the place, and it's all true what I've told you. I haven't said a word about all the made-up stuff.
Would you say there's any area of the complex that you haven't visited? I mean, are there rooms that are sealed off that you've never been to?
I haven't been in the physicians' residences, which I forgot to put down. But as far as the main complex, I've really been through it, including clear up in the tower and all that.
Gotcha.
The university is, just in case you're wondering, is very nervous about letting people through there.
Because you don't know what, condition what some of those rooms are like.
And you ought to be nervous too, because if you got in there, you might not ever get out. McCabe@ohio.edu.
And how do you spell that, please?
MCCABE.
Okay.
Got it?
Got it. Hello again. I think this is another first for Sojourners Along the Way. What was originally captured for this program was too short for an hour program, but too long to make it a 30-minute program. So, yet again, Sojourners Along the Way will have another first. Do I call this an epilogue? On a number of programs, I've mentioned Athens, Ohio. You may have gathered I have a special place in my heart for Athens, which I do. I'm originally from New Jersey. I am now a transplant into Athens, but I have lived in a total of 4 different states and 2 other countries. I call Athens the hub of my life. So for this epilogue, what we're going to do is delve into some historical information and fun stuff in Athens and the area. Hopefully I can entice you to come check out Athens. Or if you live in Athens County, you may not know some of these things, so you may find it helpful. I want to up front give you some contact information, and hopefully you can take advantage of this to learn more about Athens and also to find the fun things that are here, okay? So, first stop, the Visitors Center. The Athens County Visitors Bureau, phone number 1-800-878-9767. On the web, www.athensohio.com or info.athensohio.com. Athens is spelled A-T-H-E-N-S. Another one is NAMI. That was mentioned in this program, and we would love to have you help find the answers for the graves that are in the cemetery that are only marked by a number. Let's find out who those people are. NAMI. The administrative number is 740-593-7424. Another part of that project, contact information, Dr. Sarah Harrington, harrings@ohio.edu. Phone number 740-593-0219. Number for the archives, as it is commonly called, 740-593-2710. The full name of the archives is the Mon Center for Archives and Special Collections, Alden Library, Athens, Ohio 45701. And I was told that with that information, something could be delivered to the archives. So please contact these places, learn about Athens, and also please give whatever information you have. To give credit where credit is due, many of these facts originated with Wikipedia, the one-stop shop for all information. Athens is the county seat of Athens, Ohio, Athens County, Ohio. Members of the Ohio Company of Associates sent the first settlers to the area in 1797. After more settlers arrived in 1798, local residents established Athens. Athens is located along the Hocking River in the southeastern part of Ohio in what was once the eastern region of two major Native American mound building groups, the Adena culture from circa 1000 BC to 200 AD, and the Ohio Hopewell tradition circa 300 BC to 700 AD. The Plains, Ohio, located just outside of Athens, has an Indian Mound Festival. You might want to check into that. By the middle of the 18th century, the Shawnees were the primary tribe of Native Americans living in what became Athens County. According to a 1794 map by Thomas Kitchen, no settlement existed in the Athens area during the time immediately prior to the founding of the city. The first permanent European settlers arrived in Athens in 1797, more than a decade after the United States victory in the American Revolutionary War. In 1800, the town site was first surveyed and plotted, but it was not incorporated as a village until 1811. In the meantime, prior to 1811, Ohio had become a state in 1803. Ohio University was chartered in 1804. It was the first public institution of higher education in the Northwest Territory. During the first session of the Second Territorial General Assembly, held in Chillicothe, from November 23, 1801 to January 23, 1802, the General Assembly passed an act establishing the American Western University at Athens. The act was approved by Arthur St. Clair, governor of the Northwest Territory, in January 1802. However, no university with the name of American Western University would be established. In February 1804, the state legislature passed an act establishing Ohio University in the town of Athens. Athens received city status in 1912. Following the 1910 census showing the population had passed 5,000 residents, which was the requirement for city status in the state of Ohio. Ohio University is presently celebrating 200th birthdays of several of its buildings, original buildings. And as a sidebar, question, what was the original capital of Ohio? It was not Columbus. Chillicothe was Ohio's capital until 1810. Then it moved to Zanesville, and then it returned to Chillicothe 2 years later. Columbus became the capital in 1816. Interesting to find out why. Why was it Chillicothe in the beginning, and then why did it go to Zanesville, and then back to Chillicothe, and then over to Columbus. You can understand Columbus being the capital because it is centrally located in Ohio, and that's a nice place. It makes it kind of equal distance for people to have to travel to get there. Originally, large tracts of land in Athens and Alexander townships were set aside through a contract between the Congress under the Articles of Confederation and the Ohio Company of Associates, a group of American Revolutionary War veterans. These lands were given to Ohio University by the federal government. This was the first federal land grant for a university, predating the Morrill Act by more than 70 years. At first, lands were mostly leased out, but the failure of many leasers to pay their rents resulted in most of the land being sold. The sale of these lands funded the growth of Ohio University. With an enrollment of over 19,000 on the Athens campus and over 28,000 for all the campuses. I'm glad to see OU growing and growing, and may it continue to grow. It's a good school. The earliest industry in the area was salt production, followed by iron production and coal extraction. And coal miners, coal was very big in this area until rather recent when the coal mines were shut down. Today, the largest employer in the county is OU. The first railroad reached Athens in 1857. In the late 19th century, an interurban line opened between Athens and Nelsonville and operated for some years. The Nelsonville Railroad is now a fun activity to participate in, and that is usually during the summertime. That is a trip that people will make. So check into the things that are available in Athens County. There's a lot of fun stuff here. Something you saw as the focus of this program, the Athens Lunatic Asylum. I thought it was interesting in checking, getting information for this epilogue. The word asylum, typically when I heard it, I would think someone insane was there or something along those lines. But we also offer political asylum, so it has a good feel for it. In fact, one of the definitions of the word asylum was sanctuary. So originally they were meaning for the Athens, and it was called the Athens Lunatic Asylum, was to be a safe haven for people. Well, later it was called the Athens State Hospital, and there were a number of other names. It was opened in 1874. In the late 19th century, the hospital was the town's largest employer. The state hospital was eventually decommissioned and the property deeded to Ohio University. It's now known as the Ridges. In 1904, the U.S. Army and the Ohio National Guard conducted joint training exercises near the city of Athens. I'll put in a plug for another Sojourners Along the Way program. The ROTC may be for you. Are you aware you can earn scholarships for college through our military? Check it out. Please, this is a Patricia request. Say thank you to those who are presently serving our country through our military. Especially say thank you to the Vietnam vets. They never received a warm welcome when they returned from obeying their orders and commands. I say, it does not matter if you agree or disagree with the leaders of the country at that time. These men and women served our country. Many did not come back. They died in the line of duty. How many of the graves we saw during this program contained the remains of one of our vets? How many more are there in those graves? How many of the graves need help to identify whose remains are buried there? Please, help if you can. Contact NAMI, contact the archives. The official population of Athens in the 2010 U.S. Census was 23,832. Athens is qualified Tree City, USA as recognized by the National Harbor Day Foundation. Now, I want to give you some of the fun events, and I also want to put a plug in for OU. It happens to be my alma mater. There's several unique gates. One is the alumni gate, and I was informed there used to be 2 ceremonies when OU first opened the door. Students entered as freshmen, they would go through the gate, and it said, "So enter that daily thou mayest grow in knowledge, wisdom, and love." And then when they graduated, they would go out through the gate that says, "So depart that daily thou mayest better serve thy fellow man, thy country, and thy God." Another gate is the class gateway, and that says religion, morality, and knowledge being necessary for good government and the happiness of mankind. Schools and the means of education shall forever be encouraged. Some of the fun things to check out, again, via the Athens Visitor Center and online, there's what they call a 30-mile meal. A meal made of food from local farms within 30-mile radius of Athens. The foliage in fall. It is worth coming to Athens, Ohio, for the hills are covered in tremendous colors. Peaceful, relaxing, refreshing, rejuvenating. It's a good time out. If you need to just charge up your batteries, come to Athens in the fall and check out the hills exploding in colors. The Paw Paw Festival, www.Ohio Paw Paw Fest. That's OHIOPAWPAWFEST.com. What is it? Hint, delicious. The Dairy Barn events. Quilting is one of the things that is a big attraction at the Dairy Barn. Check out what other events they have. Now next, if you eat the meat, then you may want to know Athens is excellent for deer hunting. If you only shoot for sport, please find another sport. Killing animals is not a sport. Actually, if you do hunt, you can donate the meat and give it to others. Check that out online also. Athens has a lot of beauty. A lot of state parks are here. Burr Oak, Stroud's Run, and Clifford State Park. And there are 24 other state parks within 100 miles of Athens. 10 are less than of an hour's drive. Now you'll find out why people come to Athens for their education and many stay. I know I have. Thank you.